I've never told anyone this story before. Not my family, not my therapist, and definitely not the local police. I'm only sharing it now because I need someone, anyone, to understand what happened that night at the abandoned Starlight Drive-In, and why I can't sleep with my TV on anymore. This happened about 3 years ago, when I was working as a night security guard for a construction company. The pay was decent. The hours were quiet, and I could catch up on podcasts during my shifts. My job was simple. Make sure no one stole equipment from various construction sites around the county. One night in late October, I was assigned to a new location, an old drive-in theater on the outskirts of town that had been closed for nearly 20 years. The construction company had purchased the property and was planning to demolish it the following week to build a new shopping center. When I arrived for my first shift, I immediately felt uneasy. The place was massive, about 6 acres of cracked concrete with faded parking spaces, all facing a giant dilapidated movie screen. The projection building stood in the center, a small concrete structure covered in graffiti. Weeds pushed through every crack in the pavement, and the rusty speaker poles stood like skeletal remains scattered across the lot. My boss had told me to park near the entrance and make rounds every couple of hours. "It's just formality," he'd said. "Nobody's been out there in years." I settled into my car around 10 p.m., turned on my heater to fight the autumn chill, and started listening to a true crime podcast. It was a moonless night, and the darkness surrounding the drive-in was absolute. The only light came from my car and the distant glow of the city a few miles away. Around midnight, I made my first round. Nothing unusual, just the quiet creaking of old speaker poles in the wind, and the occasional scurrying of what I assumed were raccoons or possums. I swept my flashlight across the massive screen, its white surface now gray and peeling after years of neglect. I returned to my car and continued my podcast. About an hour later, something strange happened. My radio, which had been off, suddenly turned on by itself. It was just static at first, but then I heard what sounded like movie dialogue playing very faintly beneath the noise. I quickly turned it off, blaming it on old wiring in my car. At 2 a.m., I started my second round. As I walked toward the center of the lot, I noticed something unusual. There appeared to be a faint glow coming from the projection building. I hadn't seen any lights on earlier, and I was certain the electricity had been cut off years ago. As I approached the building, the glow disappeared. I tried the door. It was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of mold. My flashlight revealed an old projection room with equipment still in place, covered in cobwebs. It was clear no one had been here in years, but something felt off. The room was cold, unnaturally cold compared to outside. I checked every corner of the building but found nothing, so I returned to my car. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My car was no longer the only vehicle in the lot. About 20 spaces away, I could make out the silhouette of another car, an old-fashioned model that looked like it was from the 1960s. I immediately radioed dispatch. "This is Garcia at the Starlight site. I've got an unauthorized vehicle on the premises." After a moment of static, the dispatcher responded, and I told them there was no sign of the driver. "All right," they said. "Approach with caution. Local police are tied up with an accident on the highway, so backup will be delayed." I walked slowly toward the mysterious car, my flashlight trained on it. As I got closer, I could see it was a vintage Chevrolet Impala, possibly a 67 or 68 model, in pristine condition. Too pristine. considering where it was parked. There was no dust on it, no signs of how it had driven through the muddy entrance without leaving tracks. The windows were fogged up so I couldn't see inside. I tapped on the driver's side window with my flashlight. "Security! Anyone in there?" No response. I tried the door handle, it was unlocked. I pulled it open, expecting to find teenagers who had snuck in for privacy or maybe homeless people seeking shelter. The car was empty. But it wasn't just empty. It was immaculate inside. The leather seats looked brand new, and there was a faint smell of popcorn and cigarettes. On the dashboard was a speaker. One of those old drive-in speakers that you'd hang on your window. It was connected to nothing. I closed the door and circled the vehicle. There were no license plates front or back, no personal items inside, no keys in the ignition. How did it get here? And more importantly, where was the driver? Just then, I heard it. The sound of film running through a projector. That distinctive clicking and whirring. I spun around to face the projection building, and my heart nearly stopped. The massive screen had lit up. It wasn't bright. More like a dim, flickering light, as if an old projector was struggling to push its beam all the way to the screen. But it was definitely on, showing what appeared to be the opening credits of a black and white film. I stood frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. The soundtrack began to play through the speaker poles scattered throughout the lot. It was faint at first, then gradually grew louder. Old-fashioned orchestral music that sounded tinny and distorted. This was impossible. The electricity had been disconnected years ago. The projection equipment I had seen earlier was outdated and covered in dust. None of this should be happening. I radioed dispatch again, my voice shaking. "Something's going on here. The movie screen is on somehow. I'm going to check the projection building again." The dispatcher's voice came back, but it was breaking up. "Say again. You're breaking. Can't." Then nothing but static. I headed back toward the projection building, keeping my eyes on the screen. The opening credits had finished, and now the film showed what looked like an audience in a theater. Rows and rows of people viewed from behind, all facing a screen within the screen. It was disorienting. As I approached the building, the sound from the speaker poles changed. The music faded, replaced by what sounded like an audience. Murmurs, coughs, the rustle of candy wrappers. But there was something off about it. The sound seemed to be coming from all around me, not just from the speakers. I reached the projection building and tried the door. It was locked now. I shone my flashlight through the window and saw the projector running, its reel spinning hypnotically, but there was no one operating it. I stepped back and looked at the screen again. The camera was slowly panning across the audience now, showing the backs of people's heads. But as it panned, I noticed something chilling. The theater setting had subtly changed. The seats now looked like car seats, and what I had initially thought was the inside of a regular theater now clearly resembled a drive-in. The camera continued to pan, and I began to recognize the layout. It was this drive-in, the Starlight, but full of cars and people like it must have been in its heyday. As I watched, transfixed, the camera angle shifted, now showing the audience from the front. My heart nearly stopped. The faces of the audience members were blank. Not blurry or obscured, but completely smooth and featureless, like mannequins. Yet they were moving, turning to each other, eating popcorn, laughing silently. I needed to leave. Now. I turned to run back to my car, but stopped dead in my tracks. While I'd been watching the screen, the lot had filled with cars, at least 30 of them. all vintage models from different decades, arranged in neat rows facing the screen. Just like the first car, they had appeared silently, impossibly, while my back was turned. I could see silhouettes in the cars now, the outlines of people sitting in the driver and passenger seats, but they were unnaturally still, and their heads were all tilted at the exact same angle, facing the screen. I began walking quickly between the rows of cars, trying to reach my own vehicle at the entrance. As I passed each car, I resisted the urge to look inside, but from my peripheral vision, I could tell the figures weren't moving. Not even slightly. The sound from the speakers had changed again. Now it was just breathing. The synchronized sound of dozens of people breathing in unison, growing steadily louder with each step I took. I was halfway to my car when the film on the screen changed again. The camera was now showing a single figure walking between rows of cars. My blood froze as I realized I was watching myself from an angle that seemed to be coming from the movie screen itself. I broke into a run. Behind me, I heard car doors opening. First one, then several, then what sounded like all of them at once. I didn't look back. I reached my car, fumbled with the keys, and practically dove inside. As I started the engine, my headlights illuminated the scene in front of me. The lot was empty again. No vintage cars, no silhouettes. The movie screen was dark. I backed out so quickly I nearly hit the entrance gate. The entire drive home, I kept checking my rearview mirror, convinced I was being followed by vintage cars with faceless drivers. I called in sick the next day and drove by the Starlight in broad daylight. Construction crews were already there, beginning the demolition process. I asked one of the workers if anything strange had happened overnight. "Like what?" he asked. "Like, I don't know, any cars or people trespassing?" He laughed. "Doubt it. This place has been locked up tight for years. The power was disconnected back in '99. I quit my security job that week. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that I had fallen asleep on the job and had a vivid nightmare. That's what I wanted to believe. But 3 things make it impossible for me to dismiss what happened. First, when I got home that night and emptied my pockets, I found an old ticket stub for the Starlight Drive-In, dated October 17th, 1968. I had never seen it before. Second, when the construction company demolished the screen a few days later, they found something behind it that was never reported in the local news. The skeletal remains of a person who had apparently been sealed inside the screen structure when it was built. And third, ever since that night, whenever I watch TV alone after midnight, the program occasionally glitches. Just for a split second, the regular broadcast is replaced by a frame of that same audience. Rows of faceless figures staring directly at me. And each time, they're just a little bit closer to the camera. I've thrown away 3 televisions in the past 3 years. It doesn't help. They're still watching, waiting for me to join them at the Starlight. I think, eventually, I will.